The neon lights of New York City blinked like stars trapped in concrete. Inside the top floor of a sleek skyscraper, Jalen Pierce leaned back in his leather chair, eyes fixed on the city skyline. A fresh contract worth over $1 billion lay on his desk, another win, another headline. He had built his empire from scratch. Please like and subscribe for more contents like this. From nothing to everything. Yet tonight, as the city sparkled below, an unexpected emptiness stirred in his chest. He didn't understand it. He had everything, didn't he? As he stared in silence, his assistant Ava walked in, smiling confidently, holding a folder. Mr. Pierce, your jet is fueled and ready for Nashville. Shall I alert the crew? She asked. Jalen stayed quiet, eyes on the glass, deep in thought. Then, suddenly, cancel it. Ava blinked. Sir, I'm staying a bit longer. That meeting can wait. There was finality in his tone. Ava gave a small nod, but her raised brow showed her surprise. She didn't ask questions. That wasn't her place. 10 minutes later, Jalen stepped into the back of a sleek black car. As the vehicle pulled away from the high-rise, his mind drifted somewhere he hadn't dared to visit in years, the past. The city lights of Manhattan faded behind him as Jalen rode in silence. The further they drove, the more his mind wandered. Nashville. The word alone carried a weight. It was where he had grown up, where he had dreamed, hustled, failed, and promised himself he'd never return until he had everything. Now he did. But why was he going back? The car turned down a familiar street, and suddenly his memories roared to life. There was the library where he used to sit for hours reading business magazines he could never afford. There was the corner where he sold newspapers at age 13 just to help his mother buy groceries. And then, as they rolled to the end of the block, his eyes caught sight of something that stopped his breath. Maggie's Diner. It hadn't changed. The neon signs still flickered above the rusted red awning. The booths inside were exactly as he remembered. This was the place he once said he'd never step into again until he had made it. Jalen's voice came low and certain. Stop here. His driver hesitated. Sir, just a minute. His tone left no room for argument. The car stopped. Jalen opened the door and stepped into his past. The bell above the door jingled softly as Jalen stepped inside. The scent of fresh coffee, buttered toast, and sizzling bacon wrapped around him like a forgotten coat. It was the same as it had always been. Cozy, warm, timeless. Nothing fancy, just the same checkerboard floors, red vinyl booths, and chalkboard menu hanging behind the counter. He walked slowly, taking it all in. Then he stopped at a corner booth. His booth. The one he used to sit in with a notebook full of dreams. Back when he had nothing but determination. He slid into the seat and stared out the window, letting the memories come. The late nights studying, the tears he had hidden from his mother, the vow he had made to never come back until he was more than just a kid with big dreams. And now here he was, a billionaire sitting in the same seat he once sat in as a boy who had nothing. A waitress approached, her voice soft and familiar. What can I get you, sir? Jalen turned, and his world shifted. The woman standing in front of him had dark brown hair pulled into a messy bun. Her uniform was simple, white shirt, black apron, name tag. But her face, it made his heart stop. It was Naomi Brooks, the Naomi, his best friend, his high school sweetheart, the girl who once swore she'd leave this town and take on the world. But now she looked tired. Her eyes, once full of fire, were dull. Lines rested where smiles used to live. Jalen's voice came out barely above a whisper. Steak and coffee. Naomi nodded, scribbled the order, and turned away. She hadn't recognized him. Jalen watched her walk, something in his chest twisting. It had been over 10 years since he'd seen her. Back then, they had planned a future together. Big cities, big dreams. But somehow, somewhere, life had pulled them in different directions. As she returned with his plate, he couldn't stay quiet. Naomi, he said gently. She paused, startled. Her eyes met his. Naomi's brow furrowed as she looked at him. How do you know my name? She asked. Her voice held suspicion and a hint of fear. Jalen leaned forward, trying not to smile too wide. Riverside High, class of 2012. The words hung in the air. For a second, she looked confused. Then recognition hit her like a wave. Her mouth parted. Jalen, she whispered. Jalen Pierce. He nodded, offering a smile. Not the polished one from magazine covers, but the smile of a boy who had never forgotten her. Naomi's hand trembled as she set the plate down. I can't believe it, she murmured. You're the Jalen Pierce? Guilty, he said, trying to lighten the mood. But inside his heart ached. She looked stunned, and something in her expression shifted from shock to something heavier. You made it out, she said. I always knew you would. Jalen looked at her closely. I didn't expect to see you here, he said softly. Naomi gave a half-hearted shrug, her smile hollow. Some of us don't get second chances, Jalen. Her words were a punch to his chest. They sat in silence for a moment, then began to talk. They talked about school, about the dreams they once shared, about the night they sat on the hood of her father's car and planned to move to New York together. But the more they talked, the more guarded Naomi became. Something had changed in her. Something she wasn't saying. Finally, Jalen couldn't stay silent. Naomi, what happened? He asked gently. You were going to change the world. Naomi looked down, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. My dad died, she said, her voice low. Sophomore year at Harvard. Then my mom got sick. My little brother was still in high school. I had to come back. I dropped out, took whatever jobs I could find. Maggie's was the only one that stuck. Jalen swallowed hard. The girl he had once loved, the brightest mind in school, had faced a storm he never even knew about. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. Naomi gave a bitter laugh. Don't be. It's life. You get what you get. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told another story. She was tired, not just physically but in her soul. Jalen felt a tightness in his chest. He had thought of her often, wondering where she ended up. He never imagined this. You're still here, he said quietly. She nodded. Yeah, still here. Still waiting on tables. Some dreams just don't come true, Jalen. And with that, she walked away, leaving him with his untouched coffee and 1,000 thoughts. That night, Jalen couldn't sleep. Naomi's words stayed with him, haunting him like a ghost. He had the power to change lives. He had done it 100 times for strangers. But this was Naomi. She had been his past. Could she be part of his future too? He didn't want to insult her by throwing money at her. She deserved more than pity. She deserved a second chance, just like he had been given. 2 days later, Naomi found a black envelope on her windshield. Elegant gold letters spelled one sentence. Meet me at 9 a.m. Pierce Global. Naomi's heart pounded as she entered the towering glass building. She had never been inside a place like this. Everything sparkled. The receptionist led her to the top floor, and the doors opened to a breathtaking view of the city. Jalen stood up from behind a massive desk. Naomi, he said, voice calm and steady. I want to offer you a position at my company. She froze. What? Not just any job, he added, sliding a folder toward her. Managerial. 6-figure salary. Full benefits. And I'll cover your mom's treatment and your brother's education. Naomi's hands shook as she opened the folder. Why are you doing this? Jalen met her eyes. Because you deserve a second chance. Naomi stared at the contract in front of her. She read the numbers once, then again. 6 figures. Benefits. A full package that could change her family's life overnight. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. Jalen, this is too much, she said quietly. You don't owe me anything. He stood, walking around the desk to sit beside her. It's not about owing. You were always meant for more than a diner. You were supposed to lead, to create. I'm just giving you back what life stole. Naomi pressed her lips together. But why now? Jalen's gaze softened. Because I believe in you. And I never stopped. For the first time in years, Naomi felt the stirrings of something she had nearly forgotten. Hope. Naomi started at Pierce Global the next week. Everything felt new, overwhelming, yet oddly familiar. She was rusty at first, papers scattered, phone calls jumbled, but she was determined. And Jalen noticed. He watched her from afar, saw her stay late, take notes, ask questions. One afternoon, she stepped into his office, holding a binder. I reorganized the East Coast client files. Thought it might help. He smiled. Already proving your worth. Naomi chuckled nervously. I just don't want to let you down. Jalen stood. You won't. The simple confidence in his voice steadied her. For the first time in years, she started to believe she belonged in a place like this. But not everyone welcomed Naomi's presence. Whispers circulated in the hallways. She used to be a waitress, right? I heard she's Jalen's old flame. She doesn't even have a degree. Naomi heard them, pretended she didn't. But they stung. One afternoon, she overheard two women near the break room laughing. Sleeping your way to the top works faster than Harvard, I guess. Naomi turned and walked away, her chest tight. That night, she sat at her apartment, questioning everything. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe this second chance was a mistake. But deep down, she knew better. And she wasn't going to let gossip steal what she had earned. The next morning, Jalen noticed her quiet demeanor. She avoided eye contact, barely smiled. During a meeting, she stayed silent even when he expected her to speak. Afterward, he called her into his office. Naomi, what's going on? He asked gently. She hesitated. Do you think people change? Jalen leaned back. Yes, if they want to. She nodded slowly. Then, I guess I'm trying to. He looked at her carefully. Did someone say something? Naomi hesitated, then shook her head. No, it's fine. Jalen didn't press. But as she walked out, he made a silent vow to protect her. Not just as an employee, but as someone who mattered. That evening, Jalen received an unexpected message. Damian Cole, his longtime business rival, had scheduled a meeting with one of Pierce Global's key partners. It wasn't unusual for Damian to move in Jalen's circles, but something felt off. The next morning, Jalen walked into his office and found Naomi waiting, holding a newspaper. Her hands trembled as she handed it to him. Page 6, she whispered. Jalen opened it and froze. There was a full-page article. Billionaire's Mystery Woman, from diner to corporate darling. It featured a photo of Naomi walking beside him. The article hinted at favoritism, impropriety, and betrayal. At the very bottom, sources close to Damian Cole. Naomi's face was pale. I didn't know they were watching me, she said. I didn't say anything to anyone. Jalen folded the paper and set it aside. I know. They're making it sound like I slept my way into this job. Her voice cracked. And now Damian's using it against you. Jalen stepped forward. Naomi, look at me. She did, barely holding back tears. You got this job because you earned it. That article is trash. But people will believe it. Then let them. You and I know the truth. Naomi wiped her eyes, trying to stay strong. I don't want to be the reason your company gets hurt. Jalen's tone was calm but firm. You're not. Damian's been trying to hurt this company for years. You're just the latest excuse. 3 days later, Naomi received a private message at work. No name, just an address and a time. Curiosity led her there. It was a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Waiting for her was Damian Cole. Tall, confident, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Brooks, he said, standing. Thank you for coming. Naomi sat cautiously. Why am I here? Damian leaned in. Because I'm offering you a future. A real one. A public relations role with my firm. Triple your salary. full media training, travel, power. She stared at him. And the catch? You leave Jalen, and you make a statement that everything they wrote was true. Naomi left the meeting with her mind spinning. The offer was generous, more than generous. It was everything she had dreamed of years ago. Recognition, money, freedom from struggle. She stood at her window that night, looking over the skyline, trying to breathe. Damien's voice echoed in her head. You'll never escape your past unless you bury it. But then she remembered Jalen, the way he had believed in her. The job offer, the protection, the way he had looked at her after that article came out. He hadn't doubted her for a second. That meant something. It meant more than she'd realized. For days, Naomi didn't speak to Jalen. She threw herself into work, hoping the distraction would help. But inside, she was torn. Damien's offer sat in her inbox, and signed but very real. Meanwhile, Jalen treated her no differently. He was kind, professional, steady. Not once did he bring up the article or the meeting. One afternoon, as they walked out of a board meeting, he stopped beside her. If you ever feel like you need to talk, he said softly, I'm here. Naomi looked up at him, guilt tightening in her throat. He didn't know she had met with Damien, and that made the decision even harder. That night, Naomi sat on her tiny couch, the laptop open in front of her. Damien's contract glared from the screen. It was so easy. One click, and she could be done with struggle forever. But at what cost? Her phone buzzed. A text from Jalen. Hope you got some rest. Big day tomorrow. Proud of you. Simple words, but they hit her like a wave. She closed the laptop slowly. Then she whispered into the quiet room. I'm not that girl anymore. The next morning, she walked into the office with a clear decision in her heart. One that would change everything. Naomi stood outside Jalen's office the next morning, her hand hovering near the door handle. She had made her choice, but she hadn't told him yet. When she walked in, Jalen looked up from his desk and offered a soft smile. Morning, he said, like it was any other day. Naomi sat down without a word. The silence stretched between them. There's something I need to say, she began, her voice low. Jalen waited patiently. I met with Damien, she admitted. His eyes darkened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. He offered me everything. Power, fame, a position that could change my life. She hesitated, but I said no. Jalen studied her for a long moment. Why, he asked. Naomi took a breath. Because it wasn't real. It wasn't earned. And I would have had to betray you. I couldn't do that. You gave me a chance, not out of pity, but because you saw something in me I'd forgotten. Jalen leaned forward, his voice quiet. I didn't want to believe he'd go after you like that. But I'm proud of you for saying no. That couldn't have been easy. Naomi smiled faintly. It wasn't, but it felt right. For the first time in weeks, the tension between them broke. Not completely, but enough. Later that week, Jalen brought Naomi into a high-stakes board meeting. Damien had made aggressive moves on several shared investors. The room buzzed with skepticism. Naomi sat quietly until Jalen gestured to her. Naomi Brooks has something to share, he announced. With measured confidence, she stood and presented a counter-proposal she'd spent days preparing. One that protected the company and exposed Damien's shady tactics. By the end, the room was silent. Then, applause broke out. Even the toughest investors nodded in approval. When the meeting ended, Jalen leaned over and whispered, Told you, you belong here. That evening, Jalen and Naomi stood on the rooftop terrace of Pierce Global. The city stretched out before them, soft in the twilight. You did something incredible today, Jalen said. Naomi shrugged. I just told the truth. You didn't just tell it, you fought for it. She looked at him then, really looked. You know, she said slowly. I used to imagine what it'd be like if we met again. Did it look anything like this? He asked. She smiled. Not exactly, but maybe better. The moment lingered, tender and unspoken. They didn't need to say more. It was all there in their eyes. Weeks passed. Naomi found her rhythm. Her confidence grew. The whispers faded, replaced by respect. One afternoon, she returned to Maggie's diner, this time in a crisp blazer, not an apron. She sat at the same booth where she'd once served coffee and stared out the window, just as she had years ago. But everything had changed. She had changed. When she returned to the office, she found a small note on her desk from Jalen. "Proud of you. Always." She folded it carefully and tucked it into her planner. Not just a job. Not just redemption. This was purpose. At an internal company event, Naomi was invited to speak. The theme was second chances. She stood in front of a crowded room, heart pounding. "A few months ago, I was serving pancakes in a small-town diner. Today, I'm helping lead one of the fastest-growing firms in the country. But this isn't a story about luck. It's about people who see potential when you've forgotten it exists. It's about not giving up. And more than anything, it's about believing that your past doesn't disqualify you from a powerful future." The room stood and clapped. Jalen at the back smiled with quiet pride. In the months that followed, Damien Cole's empire began to crumble. Investigations opened. Contracts fell through. His attempts to smear Jalen and Naomi backfired, revealing more about his own corruption. Jalen never gloated. He didn't need to. His focus remained forward. Naomi asked him once, "Aren't you glad he's finally losing?" Jalen shrugged. He built on lies. It was bound to collapse. Naomi nodded slowly. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Jalen looked at her seriously. "You gave me a reason to fight harder." And in that moment, she realized something. This wasn't just business anymore. Jalen and Naomi grew closer, not because of their past, but because of who they had become. They spent long evenings in strategy meetings that turned into life talks. They shared meals, laughter, and memories, but with a new kind of tenderness. One night, as they walked out of the office together, Jalen looked at her and said, "I think we were always meant to meet again, just when the timing was right." Naomi smiled, her heart full. "And maybe this time we won't lose each other." It wasn't a grand declaration. It didn't have to be. It was honest and real. Months later, Naomi returned to her old neighborhood, not to escape but to give back. She launched a mentorship program for young women stuck in cycles of poverty and low expectations. She used her story as proof that starting over is not weakness, but strength. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Jalen stood beside her, proud. "You didn't just rebuild your life," he whispered. "You're building others now." Naomi looked around at the smiling faces of girls who reminded her of who she used to be. "I think that's what second chances are really for," she said, "so we can give them too." One evening, Naomi and Jalen sat outside her small townhouse, sharing takeout and memories. No fancy suits, no business talk, just two people who had walked through fire and come out stronger. "You know," Naomi said, "if someone had told me a year ago this would be my life, I would have laughed." Jalen leaned back, gazing at the stars, and I would have told them it was overdue. They both laughed. Then silence settled, peaceful and full. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "This feels like a beginning," she said. Jalen nodded, gently resting his hand over hers. "Because it is." Like and subscribe for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.